But my questions go to the issue of multiple voting, Mr Rogers, and I'm just wondering if you've got any information that you can share with us about the 2016 election and the incidence of multiple voting. You remember that we did this exercise following the 2013 election.
Certainly, Senator. Maybe I'd talk generally about a couple of things that might assist. We took the unusual step before the 2016 election, the first time we've ever done it. I'm phrasing this very carefully, but we wrote to a select group of people who we thought may be at risk of not understanding their obligations under the Electoral Act. And so we wrote to 4,627 people before the election. We've never done that before, to remind them of their obligations and to explain the voting process. And that was an attempt, again, to demonstrate the seriousness that we treat this particular issue. Senator, I'm going back to 2013, but from memory, roughly, I think we sent out originally something like 16,000 odd letters.
Yep, 19, I think it was.
I'm looking back.
So originally started with.
For 2013, sorry, we sent out about 18,000 letters for multiple voting.
Close to 19.
That's about what I remember. This time around, we've sent out almost the same number of letters for multiple marks, and that's 18,343. And I can even give you a state breakdown on that if you'd like.
Yep.
Just out of interest. So
yes.
I'm very conscious, though, this first round of letters, there may be entirely innocent explanations.
Oh, absolutely. One of the questions, just to give you a sense, I'm curious to know why people multiple vote and to see whether or not the reasons for multiple voting is consistent with the reasons you gave following the last federal election. Keen to understand, has someone multiple voted or multiple marked 3 times, 4 times, 6 times? We'll get that a little bit later. But the state breakdown would be
before we move to the state background, I'm just interested in following up a comment that you made, Mr Rogers, there about your careful choice of language and the 4,000 odd people who you were concerned might not understand their obligations under the Electoral Act. What led you to form the view that these people may not understand their obligations?
Prior history, Chair. And again, there's no accusation here at all in any way, shape or form. So this was just, we're trying to be helpful by pointing out what the obligations are under the Electoral Act. And there was absolutely no accusation in the letters that we sent out, which is why I'm being very careful with my language. But we wanted to make sure, we wanted to treat this seriously.
Of course. And I'll hand it back to Senator Sis in a moment. But when you say prior history, what do you mean by that?
My helpful colleague has told me that the category we used is 2 marks or more, marked off a roll 2 times or more in the last 2 electoral events. So these are, for whatever reason, individuals we thought there may have been a lack of understanding of the process.
Right. So without making any judgment as to why there were 2 marks, just to clarify, these 4,000 people had multiple votes cast in their name at a previous election.
I think I'm going to categorise that slightly differently. Instead of saying there were multiple votes, there were multiple marks against their name on the electoral roll at the previous 2 electoral events.
So they could have voted informally.
But when a mark is only made against the name of someone's on the electoral roll if they are given ballot papers. So presumably that would mean that these people had, for whatever reason...
Not necessarily, Senator, and I might explain that because quite often with the, I think at the end of each election, we scan, or the end of the last election, we scan 12 million papers, certified list papers, and we then do a huge cross-matching exercise with certified lists from each different polling place. And it could well be that there are administrative errors that lead to someone having their name marked off more than once.
Sorry, so just one final question, then I'll give back to Senator Smith. Sorry for interrupting. Is it possible, and are you planning to check now after this election, where if any of those 4,000 people have again had multiple marks against their names?
We will check that, Senator, yes.
And when will you be able to do that by?
Fairly shortly. Now,
And
there's a process that we go through at the end of each election.
Yep.
We write out to people, we give them time to comment, we might write out a second time, we do a range of activities, and we're in the middle of that at the moment. So it's too early for me to tell you what happened with our friends, the
Yep.
4,627 people that we wrote to, but there will be a time when we have that information.
great. When you do have that information, will you propose to make it public in any way? Not the names of the people necessarily, but how many there were that were affected by this multiple instances?
I'm pretty sure, Senator, that it's going to form part of our submission. There'd be no reason why we would not do that to the Joint Standing Committee, so that information will ultimately be public.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, Senator Smith. Back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious to talk about, I do want to come back to the 4,627 because it sounds like it was a mitigation strategy, but you still had 18,343.
That's correct, Senator, but I'm also conscious that the roll grew
Yep.
during the period.
And I'll come to the what proportion. So let's go back to the state-by-state breakdown of that 18,343.
Okay, so, and again, our language is important here, Senator, as you know, with the history of this. These are apparent multiple voters.
Agreed.
Not multiple
That's
votes. Okay, so for New South Wales, 6,760. For Victoria, 4,800. For Queensland, 2,792. For Western Australia, 1,776. For South Australia, 1,414. For Tasmania, 359. For the ACT, 264. And for the Northern Territory, 178.
Thank you.
And as
So-
you know from previous questions about this, Senator, that's the very start of a process that will be quite complex and involved and take some time for us to work through.
Which brings me to my second question. Of the 18,343 that you've written to, how many responses have you had back thus far?
I think it's going to be hard for me to answer, Senator, because that's also done on a state-by-state basis, and we're in the middle of that process as we speak. I'm just...
So the deadline or the return date by which people are are asked to provide a response has passed?
I'm just seeing if my colleague can provide some... Okay, considering we're still in the middle of that. Right, so we have had responses from many of those, and we've now sent out a second notice to 7,141 individuals who did not respond to the first letter, and we are still awaiting responses for those.
So 11,000 people responded
Yes?
and about 7,100 didn't respond, and you've written back to those in a second batch.
Yes?
So of the 11,000 that responded, have you been able to do any analysis on those?
We're still in the process of doing that right now, Senator,
Right.
so it's still a little early for us to give you that. But I think, as you know, Senator, last time, in 2013, it's the first time we worked extremely closely with the AFP and referred a very large number of those matters to the AFP for their further investigation. I forget exactly, or maybe I've got it, yes. We referred something like 7,743 instances in 2013 to the AFP, and again, we have established a good working relationship with the AFP this time round, and we are working out how best to proceed with the AFP at the moment. So,
Of the 7,141 that haven't responded, have you got a state-by-state breakdown on that?
yes, I do, Senator.
Yep.
New South Wales, 2,621.
Yep.
Victoria, 1,908. Queensland, 1,038. Western Australia, 682. South Australia, 561. Tasmania, 123. The ACT, 101. And the Northern Territory, 107.
Okay. So are you able to give us any information about the numbers of people that might have voted more than twice?
Yes, I think we can.
You recall at the last election there were 128, I think.
Yes. So, is that 51?
That's 51. Checking my handwriting, apologies.
So I think I'll start at the top, Senator, and perhaps work my way down. You'll remember that last time I think the maximum alleged number of
It was 15, if I recall.
was 15, and I think what we've got this time is the maximum is 11, from what I'm reading here.
Yeah, correct.
And two people.
Yep.
I think at the last election, one person had allegedly voted 15 times. This time it's two, and then two people have 5 marks recorded against their name.
And one person has 11?
Two people have 11.
Yep, great, okay, yep, contagious, yep.
And then there's a gap. Two people then have 5
Yep.
marks recorded. 4 people have 4. And 51 people have 3 marks against their name.
Oh, that is interesting.
And then the remainder of those are 2 marks.
Can you tell us in which states or territories those multiple marks occurred? So of the 2 that had 11 marks,
Senator, I'm going to have to...
That's Dixon and Bennelong? The electorate divisions of Dixon and Bennelong.
Not Dixon, but I think I might just take that on notice to be
Yep.
very accurate, Senator.
Okay.
Yes, I will be able to provide that detail, but don't have it here at the moment.
okay. So then going back to the 4,627 people,
Yes.
can you give us a state or territory breakdown in terms of
I
where
will
they
be
were
able to
from?
provide that, Senator. I'll take that on notice and provide that to you.
Cool. That's fine. Thanks very much.